This episode contains spoilers for the anime Love is War. For those of you that don't know, Love is War is a romance comedy that takes place within the student council of Shuchin. Love is War begins by telling the audience that the first person to confess in a relationship is the loser, becoming the servant of the one that they confess to. And while this adds a bunch of humor to start the show off, it definitely sets the stage for the show. The main plot of the show rests upon the shoulders of the president of the student council room, Miyuki Shirogane, and the vice president, Kaguya Shinomiya. With that little prelude out of the way, we can begin to talk about Ishigami. Ishigami makes his debut in episode 6 as one of the 4 original council members. Ishigami is presented as an expert in finances. The president takes note of this skill and appoints him as the treasurer of the student council. It's Ishigami who we see handling the budget responsibilities of the various clubs at Shuchin Academy. One of the early points of humor in this show is when Ishigami makes a slip up and says something either embarrassing, creepy, or just downright weird. And by the end of the first season, he seems to just be this side character for comedic relief. The only real detail we get of Ishigami's past in the first season comes from episode 10. In this episode, the president and the vice president get into a huge argument over a single piece of cake. After the fight is over, both Shirogane and Shinomiya go to their friends to confide in. It is during this back and forth conversation between the president and Ishigami that we see a glimpse of his past. At the time, Ishigami's words make sense for the moment, applying directly to the president and his own problem. But it's only after season 2 that we understand the real meaning of his words. Ishigami tells the president that if he doesn't have anything to feel guilty about, then there's no need for him to apologize. Season 2 of Love is War begins to tease little details about Ishigami's past. While being neither well hidden nor straightforward, these details about Ishigami are very important to who he is, and they begin to give us some explanation for the way he acts and some of his weirdness. The way he sits in the shadows, the way he observes everybody, and the way he so easily judges those around him. Not to mention his lack of self-confidence, which doesn't help him escape his depressed mindset. But where did all this negativity and lack of confidence come from? If we take a step back into Ishigami's last year of middle school, we see a completely different person. Despite being an outcast, watching middle school culture from the sidelines, Ishigami is bold. From his own mouth, he tells us that he had a strong sense of justice, and he wasn't willing to put up with people's crap. So what was it that broke Ishigami? What changed his character so much from this quiet and bold, watchful character to this depressed and unconfident slob? Ishigami's destruction began with a girl named Otomo. To oversimplify, Otomo was Ishigami's classmate, a girl that kept bringing kindness and hope to Ishigami's life, interacting with him despite him being a nobody. This kindness and hope began to gnaw away at Ishigami's negativity. And when the day came that Otomo got a boyfriend, Ishigami wasn't angry at them. In fact, he wished happiness upon Otomo. That was until he heard something that he wasn't supposed to. Once Ishigami learned that Otomo's boyfriend was only using her and other girls for physical pleasure, Ishigami confronted him personally, in a way that was very honorable and respectful. That was until his emotions got the better of him and he went ballistic.
I wanted to make his face so ugly that no girl would ever want him again.
What further escalated this bad situation was Ishigami's refusal to defend himself. Ishigami's original intent was to expose the lies of his evil classmate. But his opponent was crafty. After giving in to his emotions and beating Otomo's boyfriend, Ishigami lost his credibility. He was framed as a stalker, someone who would use violence to get his way. But there is another side to Ishigami's character that fights against this dark past of his, something that wages war against the negativity in his own life. It is the simple characteristic of integrity. Ever since the day of his great undoing, Ishigami never gave up on what he believed in. And yes, there was lots of dialogue within his mind, passing back and forth between the realm of giving in or staying strong. He chose to stay strong. Ishigami is a great example of someone who doesn't give up. And I'm not talking in the sense of their dream, giving up on something that they want to believe in. I'm talking about never giving in to their opponent, standing strong despite the burden and the soul-crushing weight of that decision. I want to briefly mention how similar Ishigami is to a man in the Bible called Job. A man who lost everything to circumstances that he couldn't control, and because of his loss, many around him assumed that this came from something that he did wrong, a punishment upon him from God himself. But Job also never gave up, keeping his integrity to the end. These are two very different situations. I just love the similarities between them. Ishigami eventually overcame his dark past, moving on completely from it. And while it had scarred and changed him, it did not destroy him. He began to trust those around him, not only the president, but the cheerleading squad as well. There's another aspect of Ishigami I'd like to touch on before we conclude today, and that is his unique form of kindness. The best example of this lies within the relationship between him and Ino Miko, the 5th student council member. Miko is not somebody that Ishigami easily gets along with. In fact, they only have 2 or 3 good interactions throughout the entirety of the show. Yet regardless of these hostile feelings towards Ino, Ishigami treats her with love and respect.
We'll beat her, but in a way that's honorable and fair.
I think it's the imperfection of Ishigami's kindness that gets me. He's still biased and doesn't exactly like Ino. Ishigami contains his emotions and acts properly, despite what his mouth might say. At the end of the day, Ishigami sure has his flaws, but he's not without strength either. His incredible integrity is something to marvel at, and his kindness endures all manner of prejudice. And at the end of the day, I wish I had some of his integrity. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the story of the boy with unbreakable integrity, Yu Ishigami. Until next time.